Hello gladiators! Today's video is on converting between fractions and decimals. So please make sure to take excellent notes throughout the video. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so the essential question we're asking ourselves in this video is what process do we use to convert decimals to fractions and fractions to decimals? Well, I hope this video will help answer both of those questions for you. So decimals and fractions are rational numbers, okay? And a rational number is any number that can be expressed as a fraction, okay? So if you can write it as a fraction, it's considered a rational number. So let's say, for example, 1/2, that would be considered a rational number. 2/3 is a rational number. Even the whole number 5 is considered rational because I could put it over 1 in the denominator. Remember, 5 divided by 1 is still 5, so it still has the same value, but it's written in fractional form, which means it's considered a rational number. Now, there are two types of decimals that are rational. One is called a repeating decimal, okay? And a repeating decimal does exactly what it sounds like it does. It goes on and on forever. It's a decimal that has one or more numbers that repeat forever. Okay, so let's say, for example, 1 decimal 3, 3, 3, and it goes on and on forever. Okay, that is a repeating decimal. And in order to write this answer, we can use bar notation. And basically what bar notation is, it is a line above that repeating number. Okay, and it just shows you that that number 3 repeats forever. Now a terminating decimal, also just like it sounds, it does terminate. It's a decimal that ends with a remainder of 0. So for example, 2.7, 2 7/10. Notice no number is repeating. So there you have the difference between a repeating and terminating decimal. So how do we convert from a decimal to a fraction? Well, that's pretty easy. We can do this in 3 easy steps. Step 1, you just say it. Step 2, you write it. And step 3, you simplify it whenever you need to. Now let me show you what I mean by this. And I'm pretty sure you did plenty of this in 5th grade, so let's just see if you remember it. Let's say, for example, you have 0.05. Well, you're well aware of place value, and you know that behind the decimal we have tenths, then hundredths, and then thousands. Okay, so if I'm reading this, okay, I'm saying, okay, well, this is in the what? Hundredths place value. So I read this as 5/100ths. Well, I just did step 1. I said it, 5/100ths. Now I'm going to write it. Well, I just said 5/100ths, so that's how I'm going to write it, as a fraction, 5/100ths. And that last step would be to simplify it if I need to. And in this case, I know I do need to do so. So I know that both 5 and 100 are divisible by 5. So if I divide both the numerator and denominator by 5, I would end up with 1/20. So 0.05 can be written as 5/100ths and can then be simplified to 1/20. And we just converted this decimal to a fraction. Okay, now we're going to talk about how to convert fractions to decimals, okay? And there's a couple ways we can do this. Method 1 is to use equivalent fractions, okay? So that's what we're going to do with these two problems here. Example 1 says convert 9/12 to a decimal, okay? So I'm going to say, okay, well, the first thing I notice is that I can simplify 9/12, okay? And if I can do so, maybe once I simplify it, I can find an equivalent fraction that will give me a 10 or 100 or 1,000 in the denominator. Because remember, we're very familiar with place value. So if I can make this easier on myself, maybe that's the way that's the route I want to go. Okay, so let's go ahead. I know that 9 and 12 are both divisible by 3. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and divide 9 by 3 and 12 by 3, and I end up with 3/4. Okay, now many of you can probably look at it and just say, oh, 3/4, 3/4, that's 75 cents. Okay, and you know that would turn into 0.75. However, if you weren't aware of that, then you can think, okay, well, I want an equivalent fraction. Could I somehow get from a 4, turn this 4 into a 10, possibly? Well, no, I can't. 4 doesn't go into 10 evenly, but I know 4 can go into a 100, okay? So 4 times what is 100? Well, 4 times 25 is 100, okay? See if I can write that in there. 4 times 25 is 100. So whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do up at the top. Well, 3 times 25 is 75. Okay, and now I have 75 hundredths. Well, I know how to write 75 hundredths. Okay, using place value, I know behind the decimal I have tenths and then hundredths. Okay, and so if I just fill those in, 75 hundredths, my decimal is 0.75. Now, in example 2, they want us to express 3 and 1/5 as a decimal. Okay, now 3 and 1/5 is a mixed number, okay, meaning it's comprised of a whole number and a fraction, okay? So what I'm going to do is I say, okay, well, 3 is my whole number, so that's not changing. So I'm going to go ahead and put my 3 here and put my decimal because 1/5 is going to be turned into a decimal, okay? So I'm going to say, okay, here's my 1/5, and I'm thinking, okay, can't simplify it, but place value, I know that 5 can easily be turned into a 10, and I can make an equivalent fraction here. I know that 5 times 2 is 10, and 1 times 2 is 2. Okay, so I just went from 1/5 to 2/10. Remember, they both have an equivalent value. Okay, 1/5 is exactly the same as 2/10, and 2/10 I can write that easily. I know 2/10, well, 0.2 gives me 2/10. So now I just take that and move it over here, and my answer would be 3.2. And that's how we would convert fractions to decimals using equivalent fractions. Okay, now there is a second method, and that method is just to divide. Okay, sometimes place value and equivalent fractions is just not going to work. Okay, in example 3, we have a perfect example of this. 5/6, okay? We want to turn that into a decimal. And first thing I notice is, okay, I can't simplify it. I know I can't get my 6 to somehow turn into a 10 through an equivalent fraction. It can't go into 100. 6 cannot go into 1,000. I think, okay, I can't do this. So the only thing left to do is to divide. Now, when dividing, it's very important to note that your dividend, okay, is always your numerator, okay? The number at the top, that numerator, always goes inside, okay? It's not always the bigger number, okay? It's always the numerator that goes inside, okay? And that means my divisor will be 6, okay? Now the first question I ask myself is, okay, I want to divide, can 6 go into 5? Okay, well, okay, no, 6 cannot go into 5. It can't go in as a whole number, so I know my answer is going to be some sort of a decimal. So I say, okay, 6 cannot go into 5, so I'm going to put a 0 there. Okay, I'm going to pop down a decimal, and then I'm going to pop that decimal right back up there. All right, and then I'm going to add a 0 because I have to continue on. So can 6 go into 50? Okay, well, yes, 6 can go into 50. 6 times 8 is 48. Okay, we have a remainder of 2. Okay, now I don't just leave it there. I have to continue on, so I'm going to go ahead and bring down a 0. Okay, and now I got to say, okay, well, can 6 go into 20? Well, yes, 6 times 3 is 18. Okay, still have remainder of 2 there. Okay, so I'm going to bring down another 0. And what do you start noticing? Okay, 6 times 3 is 18. What's going to keep happening? Okay, that 3 is repeating. Okay, so what am I going to do? Okay, I'm going to say, okay, I know it's going to go on and on forever. So I'm going to say my answer is equal to 0.83, and my bar notation is going to go above the 3. Not the 8 and the 3, just the 3, because the 3 is the one that is repeating forever. Okay, let's try this one more time. Let's go ahead and take 3/8. Okay, again, can't simplify, can't get 8 to turn into a 10 or 100 or 1,000. So I say, okay, well, let me actually backtrack a bit. Actually, 8 can go into 1,000. But for the purpose of this, we're going to go ahead and use division. But you can bet we'll have you memorizing how many times 8 can go into 1,000. Okay, so let's go ahead and set up this division. Numerator inside, denominator outside. Okay, can 8 go into 3? No, cannot. Decimal, pop it up, add my 0. Okay, can 8 go into 30? Yes. Can go in 3 times. 3 times 8 is 24. Remainder 6. Bring down a 0. 8 into 60. 7 times, which is 56. Remainder 4. Bring down a 0. And, oh, there we go. 8 can go into 45 times with no remainder. Okay, so my answer for this problem would be 375 thousandths, 0.375. Okay, now as an extension, we're going to talk about percents, okay? Now percents we will go into more detail on future lessons, but for right now I think it's something good to kind of expose you to, and I think you can pick this up quite easily. So a percent is a ratio that compares a number to 100, okay? It basically means parts per 100. So let's go ahead and use 4/5. Let's use that as an example. Now, we learned how to change this fraction into a decimal, how to convert it. So let's go ahead and do so. Okay, I know 4/5, well, okay, I could divide, but I can see that 5 can go into 10. Okay, I can make an equivalent fraction here. I know 5 times 2 is 10. 4 times 2 is 8. 4/5 is exactly the same as 8/10. And I know how to write 8/10. Okay, 0.8. Okay, 8/10. Now let's go ahead and turn this decimal into a percent. How do we do that? What do we do? Well, we just said that it's a ratio that compares a number to 100. So if I can get the denominator rather to be 100 in my fraction here, then maybe I can figure out what the percent is. So let's see if I can go, okay, from 8/10. I want to say instead of a 10 as a denominator, I can make an equivalent fraction that has 100 as a denominator. And I know that 10 times 10, I'm sorry, yes, 10 times 10 is 100. And 8 times 10 is 80. Okay, 80 hundredths, well, anything over 100 is already written as a percent there. That would just be 80%. Okay, now if you want to take a little shortcut, we can just take this decimal right here, the 0.8, and we can multiply it by 100, okay? And we can get that percent much quicker because an easy way to multiply this 0.8 by 100 is just to move the decimal 2 places to the right, okay? Anytime you do that, you're basically multiplying by 100. And then we fill in this little space with a 0, okay? And we end up with 80%. Now we will practice this a whole bunch in class, but I hope this video helped to clarify a few things for you. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.